I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. Hope everyone is doing great out there. It's wonderful to be back with you. We have an amazing show for you today. We have so much to get to. There's so many news stories and so much that I want to cover today. Hey, if you're enjoying the show and you like the Candice Malcolm Show, you want to support us, do us a quick favor, like this video. It really helps in the algorithm. Leave us a comment as well. And if you want to further support what we're doing, go check out junonews.com. You can become a premium subscriber so that you never miss an update. You get all our emails, and you can join us in our fight, in our mission to replace the CBC. It is so important, folks. We need media diversity. We need independent voices out there, and that is what we are trying to build here at Juno News. So pleased to invite and welcome our guests on today's program, one of my favorite guests here on the Candice Malcolm Show, talking about Wyatt Claypool. Wyatt is a political commentator and the founder of the National Telegraph, and I wanted to bring him in to go through some of the big stories of the day with me. So Wyatt, welcome to the show. Great to see you.
Well, thanks for having me on. Yeah, we're into the fall legislative season, so now everything's popping loose again. And, it always sucks to get through a summer when nothing's going on and you still have to do a show every day.
Well, for me, I care a lot more about the cultural issues. So I'm here for the culture stuff and the political, like, day in and day out. Look, I worked in Ottawa, not for very long. I didn't last very long as a political staffer, but question period. It's fun, especially to see someone like Pierre Poilievre sort of back in his groove and grilling the Liberal government. But I'm not one of those people that lives and dies by the parliamentary schedule. But there is one story that I heard so many people in the audience wanting us to cover, and I'm talking about the ostrich farm out in British Columbia. So I'm going to walk you through the story here, and then I'm going to get you to comment on it, Wyatt. So back in December 2024, a strain of avian flu struck the Universal Ostrich Farm in Edgewood, British Columbia. So dozens of birds died, but the rest of the flock eventually recovered and they appeared to be perfectly healthy. Now, despite this, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency ordered more than 400 ostriches to be culled under its standard bird flu stamping out policies. They wanted to kill all of the ostriches. The farm owners challenged the cull order, leading to a lengthy court battle, which eventually made its way to the Supreme Court of Canada. In early September, police began erecting hay bales and restricting access around the ostrich pen. And so this started to sort of make a big deal on social media. And I saw big conservative and right-wing sort of social media influencers and journalists and people just really outraged about this. Like a pure example of outrageous government overreach, totally unnecessarily going into someone's private property and ordering that their flock be killed when it doesn't really seem like there was a good reason. So we have some good news to report, which is that the Supreme Court has stayed the order. So they've put a pause on this order to go and kill these ostriches. And so Supreme Court stays ostrich cull in BC amid protests and surprise intervention. Supreme Court has temporarily halted the planned cull of hundreds of ostriches, the world's largest living bird. A day earlier, RCMP officers called in by the CFIA to help keep the peace during the cull arrested the farm owners, Katie Pastelny and her mother, Karen, for allegedly riling up protesters when trying to feed the birds. And I know that there was some kind of like, people were unhappy that there wasn't more of a reaction from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, from the Conservative Party. We didn't really hear him say much about this. The local Conservative MP, however, MP Mel Arnold, did speak out against this in Parliament yesterday. So, Wyatt, I'm just curious, like, what do you make of this whole story? Do you think the Conservatives should have gotten more involved, or do you think that they sort of, kept their distance and that was probably the best move?
Yeah, I can't really say what motivates their hesitancy to jump on board this one. I'll admit, though, that I haven't exactly been covering it myself, but that's more of just because people like Dre Humphrey at Rebel News have been doing such a good job on the ground of covering it. It's one of those stories where it feels like it's hers at this point. I don't want to step on her toes, but I think politicians should be calling this out. And it's not just because do you care about the ostriches or not? It has to do with, do you think that bureaucracy needs to be reined in Canada, because this has really nothing to do with the ostriches. They have had scientists coming out, veterinary doctors, basically attesting to the fact that these ostriches do not pose any risk after having recovered from the avian flu. They are in fact being used in the manufacturing of pharmaceutical products and testing of vaccines and whatnot because of the ostrich eggs that they get and things in them. More complicated than I can understand. But this is really just the bureaucracy, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, just basically trying to flex its muscles and prove it can take these ostriches out because it has the power to, and that's pretty much it. And so we've been in this standoff where the government will not test the birds. The government will not justify why these birds need to be eliminated. They're just simply doing it because they have jurisdiction.
Well, 100%. And again, it just seems to me that for all the problems we have in our country, right, all of the out of control crime stories that we report on here at Juno News, government bureaucracy, bloated, the cost of government, the cost of debt, cost of borrowing, our stagnant economy, out of control housing. I mean, all the issues, right? And it's like this is what they're going to focus their time and attention, going to like a small family farm and killing birds, to me, totally unnecessarily, totally inhumane. I don't necessarily think that this should be the top issue for the Conservatives and for Pierre Poilievre. But, it was really picking up online. People on the internet were really worked up about it on social media. It could have been a big W for Pierre Poilievre to show up there and say, no, don't tread on me. Don't show up on my property and order my livestock to be killed. And we're going to stand up for the family farmer. We're going to stand up for the little guy, for property rights, and against massive government overreach. Could have been a victory, but I do also understand that they have their own priorities. You mentioned, the pharmaceutical companies, and I want to talk a little bit about this Health Canada clash with President Trump over the use of Tylenol during pregnancy. And so this is one of the things, like the audience knows, I'm a big MAHA person. I really am happy that RFKJ joined the Trump movement and the whole Make America Healthy Again. I'm on board for it, and I want it in Canada as well. And this just seems like one of those reactionary things where Trump and RFK Jr. came out and said, we're looking at evidence that shows that pregnant women should not use Tylenol excessively and that there could be a link to autism. And as soon as they did that, right, what does Health Canada do? They come out with the exact opposite. Like trying to just be reactionary and defiant, like, oh, we're the pure, true liberals who believe the science, and whatever Trump says, we're going to say the exact opposite. The only problem is, of course, that the medical community has been warning about the use of Tylenol during pregnancy for years and years. And it's very easy to go back and look at the studies, to go find, a Johns Hopkins study in 2019 linking elevated risk of autism and ADHD associated with pregnancy use of Tylenol, right? And you can look back to the same news outlets that were mocking President Trump this week, go back 4 or 5 years, and they were also publishing studies talking about how this was a risk. So here is what Health Canada said, basically that Tylenol is recommended for treatment for pain and fever during pregnancy. Health Canada currently mandates that there is no conclusive evidence that using Tylenol as directed during pregnancy causes autism or other neurodevelopment disorders. You can look at a box of Tylenol and it will literally say not recommended during pregnancy or consult your doctor before use. So it's just so weird that the Health Canada would come up with this, especially when you can literally find X posts and Twitter posts from Tylenol themselves saying, we actually don't recommend that you take Tylenol during pregnancy. That was in 2017. And in 2019, they admitted that we've actually never studied it. We have no idea whether it's safe or not because we've never bothered to study it. Wyatt, I'm going to get your thoughts on this, but first I want to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors on the show today. This is a campaign called Unsmoke. Look, folks, it's time to modernize Canada's rules on nicotine. Alternatives to cigarettes like heated tobacco, vaping products, and oral smokeless products don't burn tobacco or produce smoke. They aren't risk-free, but the growing body of scientific evidence shows that they have the potential to be substantially less harmful than smoking. Despite this, Canadians are banned access to critical information and even some products. Nicotine pouches remain banned in convenience stores, and current laws ban communication about the risks of these products compared to cigarettes. It's unbelievable. The evidence is here. The tools exist. Canadians should have the freedom to know. You can learn more by visiting unsmoke.ca. Okay, Wyatt, what do you make of the whole Tylenol autism connection?
Well, it's good that you never made it as a staffer back in the day, or else you would turn into the sorts of people that work for Health Canada who probably just went to the shelf and bought a bottle of Tylenol and say, well, of course Tylenol is good. And then they just read the back of it and all the benefits. Oh, let's see, it reduces swelling and pain and all this stuff. Here's the thing. It's not like anyone is trying to make conclusive, concrete statements that Tylenol will give your kid autism or that Tylenol will negatively affect your pregnancy. It's just in general better, unless you know concretely the opposite, that it's okay, that you should probably not be taking any supplements, any medication that you don't need. That's probably good advice for anybody. Unless you absolutely need something, you probably shouldn't be taking anything. Because it has just become a very overly medicalized society where people need pills and people need treatments for everything when you could probably just eat a healthier diet. And so what we have here is that we have people inside the Canadian government demonstrating that they actually are not very good at their jobs, in the sense that when you're coming out and you're just saying the opposite of what the Americans are saying, it's telling me that you guys don't actually do good work. If you have the time to sit around basically just trying to fight cultural wars with RFK Jr. and the American the Health and Human Services that RFK Jr. is running, and again, yeah, you mentioned it before. Tylenol has put out multiple times that you shouldn't be taking this thing, and now you have all these TikTok videos of like left-wing pregnant mothers taking Tylenol just to stick it to Donald Trump. It's kind of sickening that people live their lives that way, and they would actually play fast and loose with their lives of their children just to dunk on someone on video.
It's unbelievable. Okay, I want to play this clip of President Donald Trump announcing that the FDA would issue warnings to physicians recommending against one of the active ingredients in Tylenol during pregnancy. Let's play this clip.
Tylenol during pregnancy can be associated with a very increased risk of autism. For this reason, they are strongly recommending that women limit Tylenol use during pregnancy unless medically necessary.
So again, it's just like whatever Trump says, the exact opposite is what they believe. I found this post on X to be unbelievably telling. I want to just show it. This is a banker that I follow named John LaFarve, and he writes that the Tylenol story is a perfect case study that liberals will oppose anything Trump supports no matter what. And also, you don't hate the mainstream media enough. I think this could be like my mantra to live by. Like every time you just think that the mainstream media is awful and you can't trust them at all, they stoop even lower and show that there's even more worthy of your disdain. And so he shows, again, here's Reuters, a mainstream credible news source in the United States, in November saying too much Tylenol in pregnancy could affect development. And then here we have 12 years later, Trump links autism to Tylenol and vaccines, claims not backed by science, right? And then you have, here's a John Hopkins study back in November 2019 saying exactly what President Trump has said, that taking it is associated with elevated risk for autism and ADHD. And then here he has screenshots of 9 different academic, medical research publications just saying exactly that. Like, this is something that has been studied. The science is actually there. And yet, the legacy media, again, they're just reactive. I feel sorry for those women who get their information from the legacy media. Look, I'll tell a personal anecdote. I've had 4 babies over the last decade, and I've been pregnant a lot, and I am very, very skeptical of what I will put in my body at the time. I will read every label and, yes, ask my doctor about it. And so I'm wary about taking Tylenol because of that exact reason. And I knew that during my pregnancies, if I had a headache or I was feeling pain, you know what I would do? I'd drink some water, have some tea, go for a walk, get some fresh air. There's so many other things that you can do. Obviously, some people do have like worse instances of pain and they might need some kind of more pain treatment. But again, it's right there on the label. I personally, during one of my pregnancies, Wyatt, I suffered from really bad heartburn. And so my doctor prescribed heartburn medication for me, and I took it. And it was recommended by my doctor. During my next pregnancy, I started to get heartburn again. And I went back to my doctor and said, could I get another prescription? And she was like, actually, the medicine that I gave you is now banned because it was produced in China and they found carcinogenics in the medicine and we don't recommend you taking it. And like that spooked me because I'm like, I'm not taking anything, right? And it's like so many of these pharmaceutical companies, like you can't even trust what you're taking, right? And so I'm happy that we now have administration in Washington that cares about this kind of thing and is worried about this kind of thing and is there to protect the citizens and the people and not just Americans, because Canadians can benefit from it as well. So I'm happy for this. And to see the Canadian reaction, I mean, it's not surprising at all, but it's just so pathetic. What do you think?
Well, just going back to the media element of it, again, it's like the polish of the media outlets does so much for them. Like, all the media is basically glaze at this point. There's really no substance there. When you actually take away the nice sets that people like Rosemary Barton and David Cochran sit in, and the very like well-established brands that places like the New York Times occupies like a parasite, a paper that actually used to be reputable. All these people, when you take away all this, they're just Redditors effectively who have ended up getting themselves some sort of anchoring job, or they work, as a writer, but it's not like they put in the extra work and they're making calls and they're trying to go directly to Tylenol to see what they say. They wrote the story as soon as Donald Trump, the words left his mouth.
Exactly. Well, here we go. We've got the receipts on the episode today, Wyatt. Here is a CBC News report from October 2020 warning that the growing body of scientific evidence suggests that prenatal exposure to things like Tylenol might alter fetal development. Let's play that clip.
And medical health experts has released an important statement on pregnancy and pain medication. It's part of a study in the British scientific journal Nature. And here's what it does. It cautions pregnant women about using acetaminophen, and that is the active ingredient in Tylenol.
The statement is backed by nearly 100 scientists and doctors from around the world. They insist a higher level of caution is needed when pregnant people use fever and pain meds that contain acetaminophen, including Tylenol. The authors don't have any new evidence showing the drug harms a developing fetus, but their statement does say a growing body of experimental and epidemiological research suggests that prenatal exposure to acetaminophen might alter fetal development, which could in turn increase the risks of certain neurodevelopmental, reproductive, and urogenital disorders.
So this is funny. Actually, I noticed the first host there said pregnant women, and I'm like, okay, I guess this is like pre-woke. And then the next one was like pregnant people, right? And that's like, because again, heaven forbid you say pregnant ladies. It has to be pregnant people. You have to be gender neutral or whatever. So that's the CBC back when this was not a political issue and it was just an issue of science. Compare that to this week, the CBC writes autism and Tylenol, what the science really says. And they say health professionals around the world are disputing the Trump administration's claims about autism and its potential causes. The established peer review research on autism and its causes does not support either of these claims. So exactly the opposite of what they reported back in 2020. Look, the point of this isn't to like shame any woman out there for taking too much Tylenol and potentially be worried, but it's like there has been an outrageous growth in autism over the last 20 years. A lot of people will link it to the proliferation of the vaccine schedule, which is wild, by the way. Like if you look back to when I was a kid and in the 90s, the number of vaccines that were required was like 4 compared to what they want my children to get, which is like, I don't know, 140. It's outrageous and insane. And so a lot of skepticism around that issue. I'm not saying that there's any tie, but people want to know, they want it studied. Like, where did this come from? Why is there this huge explosion in autism? And the Trump administration is actually doing something, looking into it and saying, hey, it's obviously a combination of factors. It's obviously partially to do with, something to do with the development of the child, something to do with environment, something to do with the genes, and some combination. And so to say, well, maybe it is connected to excessive use of Tylenol during pregnancy, then people can at least have that information and move forward. But politicization of this is totally wild. What do you think, Wyatt?
Well, and the pharmaceutical industry and the government don't do themselves any favors. I'm not like an anti-pharma type person. The pharmaceutical industry obviously has a lot more benefits than negatives over time, but every industry has lobbyists, and it feels like over time that like what you're noting about the vaccine schedule. I also grew up in an era where maybe I needed like 3 or 4 that were required, and that was it. But with the rapid expansion, kind of just feels like, well, we can just in public policy say that people need 12, and now you can charge 3 times what you used to when it comes to how much product you're able to sell over a decade to new parents, and now they must be able to put more tax money in, or they must put more of their own money in to get these different shots, and maybe some of them work and some of them don't, but they're the main drivers of a lot of skepticism, because a lot of things just started feeling arbitrary over time, and then if you question it, you get attacked, which doesn't feel honest.
Well, 100%. And you say, that overall you think the pharmaceutical companies are better than they are. They produce more good than harm. I was there with you, Wyatt, until COVID, and then that totally just radicalized me. And now I have nothing but suspicion, and I don't trust them. And it's sad that I don't even trust my own family doctor, because when she tells me that my infant baby needs a COVID vaccine, I don't know that much about the other vaccines, but I know about the COVID vaccine, and there is no way that I would give it to a child. And so again, when they're recommending that to me, and they're recommending all these other hosts of vaccines that I don't know or don't believe to be necessary, it really makes you skeptical. And so does something like this, right? Like I pointed to tweets and X posts by the company Tylenol. Here it is, March 7th, 2017. We don't actually recommend using any of our products while pregnant. Thank you for taking the time to voice your concerns. Another one from 2019, admitting that they've never tested their products on pregnant ladies. While they've changed their mind, and here they are issuing a statement in the follow-up of the Trump administration's announcements. Tylenol, we stand with the science and we stand with you. And now they're saying that Tylenol is one of the most studied medications in history, and it is safe to use as directed by expecting mothers, infants, and children. There is no credible evidence linking our product with autism. So they've changed their position. They've changed the science just in the wake of the president. So again, it's putting politics ahead of the health of the people. And I think that is the problem that so many people are concerned about. Okay, I have one more topic that I want to talk to you about, why, but first I have a quick word from our sponsors, Macamee College. So are you tired of politicians growing government while your freedoms shrink? Then don't just complain, take the lead. Our partners today, Macamee College, and their applied politics and public affairs program is for freedom-minded Canadians who want to hold the government accountable. In just 2 years, through online evening courses, you'll get the applied skills to run campaigns, organize grassroots movements, and shape policy. You'll get hands-on training in your community and with the party of your choice, so you graduate ready for real change. Now, maybe it's you, maybe it's someone you know, maybe it's your son or daughter, maybe it's your friend who's passionate about politics. Here is a chance to fast-track your career into making an impact. Plus, anyone who subscribes through our link and they are successful in enrolling in this course gets a $500 Juno News scholarship towards your education, because we need more small government leaders standing up for freedom, standing against big government overreach. Intakes are in September and January. Don't wait. It's time to lead. Use the link in the description today. Check it out over at CandiceMalcolm.com/Macamee. That's MAKAMI. Okay, so we're talking about President Trump and the reaction. I want to stay with this issue and talk about what the Trump administration has done through an executive order listing Antifa as a domestic terrorist group. So on Monday, President Trump signed an executive order which designated Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. Trump announced that last Wednesday that his administration was preparing the order. Now, up here in Canada, the Liberal government remains silent on whether it will follow Trump's lead to label Antifa terrorists. We haven't heard anything about that. And it's interesting because at the same time, what is in the news? Well, the Liberals are also silent on an Antifa-linked group here in Canada, the Anti-Hate Network, which is funded in part through grants from the Trudeau government. And so, we had court cases and court papers that showed links between these two organizations. It's really, really interesting to see how these sort of violent, radical, left-wing groups, not only do they fly below the radar, but they're actually being supported and promoted in some ways through government funding and these organizations. What is your take on all this, Wyatt?
Well, yeah, and what you have with the Anti-Hate Network and other organizations like Press Progress, not that Press Progress exactly has Antifa ties the way the Anti-Hate Network does, but what this ends up being is kind of almost a siloed off, a siloed off part of both the Liberal government as well as the media, where they can do a lot of the dirty work that those organizations, the mainstream media and the Liberal government cannot do. And there's a reason why, again, our government gives so much money to the Anti-Hate Network every year, because while they're not fighting hate, when you actually go through all the reporting that this organization does, yeah, they'll call out the occasional skinhead here and there that nobody was on the side of and nobody thought was a good guy. But what it ends up being is a narrative laundering organization in order to smear conservatives. The anti-hate network, led, I believe, still by Bernie Farber, effectively goes around using anonymous Antifa accounts online in order to collect information on people, oftentimes completely warped and twisted out of context, in order to link normal conservatives with the very, very few fringe extremists around Canada. You've once been in the same room as somebody who's a racist, and he's like the one racist in your small town, and they're going to make sure that they're connected back to you. But the anti-hate network and organizations like Press Progress give the media permission to then smear you as like a sort of a second layer smear. That the anti-hate network was the one who said the defamatory things about you, and then the CBC just cites an expert who's from the anti-hate network saying that you're a terrible person. And so it's hurt a lot of careers in Canada over time. The government-funded organization who could never pull a dollar in themselves if they actually had to do it, going around basically trying to smear you through innuendo and very out-of-context associations.
Well, it's so true, right? Like these groups you mentioned, Press Progress, I don't even usually acknowledge them. They do write pieces about True North, about Juno News. They even wrote a piece about my husband and I, full of nothing but lies and smears. And I don't bother acknowledging it because I don't want to give them any more publicity. Like I don't want to send my audience over to their page so that they get more page clips. But you're exactly right. Like they are working full time. Like there are at least a dozen, if not more, journalists in Canada whose sole job is to try to cancel conservatives, to try to cancel right-wingers, to say, look at how extreme they are, to find like crazy guilt by association, 6 degrees of separation, and hit you with that smear that you're far right and hope that someone in the legacy media will pick it up. And I think that it's time for us to give them a dose of their own medicine, right? Like here you have the Anti-Hate Network, an absolutely outrageous organization who has written about True North in the past. And I don't even respond to their emails when they send them to me because they're just such liars. But, a small claims court accepted evidence that the Canadian Anti-Hate Network did assist Antifa and the far left extremist group, which has been violent. And we know that they're violent in Canada. We see them being violent. They were violent at Christie Pitts Park a couple of weekends ago. They were violent at the Sean Feucht concert in Montreal where they threw a smoke bomb in and they were out there waving an Antifa flag. You have people like Doug Saunders in the Globe and Mail gaslighting Canadians saying Antifa doesn't exist. It's not a real organization. It's like a figment of their imagination. It's not true, right? We see their flags. We see them out. We know exactly who they are, and they are violent. And these groups sit here and try to pretend that there's some problem with far-right violence in Canada. Like, I'm sorry, if I actually see evidence of the far-right, when I think of the far-right, I think of Nazis and neo-Nazis and white supremacists, and I don't see that in Canada. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Maybe there's a few of them, but I don't see it. I don't see it as a problem. I don't notice it online. It's not something that I think of as a major problem in this country. I do see Antifa. Antifa is out there. They are violent. And we are living through, Wyatt, a dangerous time, a time of political violence. We saw Charlie Kirk, the leader, one of the top conservative voices in the world, assassinated in the middle of a free speech debate. And this is a problem. We see left-wing violence. It is exploding currently. We saw an ICE facility get shot up the other day. There was a shooting at an ABC affiliate after the announcement that they were canceling Jimmy Kimmel Show, which has now been put on the air. But there is a problem with left-wing violence, and I'm glad that it is being exposed. I hope that the Canadian government will follow suit. And I just want to give the audience a quick update because I covered this on the show last week. This is another example, right? Press Progress wrote a hit piece about my husband and I. It was false. It was full of nonsense and lies. And unfortunately, the Globe and Mail picked up some of that information and published it in a piece about my husband. So my husband got a new job. He was named the CEO of Open Door, which is a technology company. And in the news write-up, this is a business reporter, right? This isn't an opinion piece. This isn't Andrew Coyne, whatever. This is a business reporter. And the way that she wrote about my husband and his new job, she classified us as part of the far right. And she wrote pieces that quoted Press Progress. Well, I took it up with the editor of the Globe and Mail because I wasn't happy about it. I thought it was outrageous. It was wrong. It was full of lies. I'm happy to report that the Globe and Mail has issued a correction on that piece. So you can now see here it is, Shopify Chief Operating Officer is leaving the company to join Open Door Technologies. And there is a long correction at the bottom. And so it says, editors note an earlier version of this article incorrectly stated that prior to his role at Shopify, Kazanjatian served as a political staffer in the Conservative Party under then Immigration Minister Jason Kenney. Mr. Jatian served as a staffer for Mr. Kenney, a former Conservative MP, when he was Immigration Minister. The way that they write this correction is truly outrageous. But
They want to waste your time as much as possible, so you don't.
Yeah, they're just like
they
trying to make it
yeah, we
technical
basically
and trying
called
to
him
make
an
it.
extremist for no reason.
Yeah, and then it also says the article incorrectly stated that Mr. Jatian co-founded the True North media website with his wife, Candice Malcolm. Mr. Jatian sits on the board of True North, a charity that's connected to the media website, which his wife started. So, I mean, I took issue with a lot in that Globe and Mail report. There were 5 paragraphs that were just totally outrageous, and they issued, minor corrections here and there. But, I'll still take it. They admitted that they lied and that they were wrong, and don't go around quoting press progress pieces, smearing my family and expect to get away with it. So I was happy at least that they issued that correction. What do you make of the fact that press progress now gets quoted by the Globe and Mail in a news piece about, by a business reporter?
Back when I was running for the Calgary Signal Hill Conservative Party nomination, I got smeared by Press Progress, and one of the people they used to smear me is now sitting as a senator. It's Dr. Christopher Wells, and it's outrageous the kind of people that they will even cite as guests, because I, at the time when they had sent me like a media request, hey, well, Wyatt, we're about to call you like transphobic and that you hate gay people or whatever, I ended up just making a video in response before the time limit was even up. They only literally gave me 3 hours to respond, by the way, which is super professional. When I've accused people or I've gone after people for really big stuff back in the day when I used to write, we would give 2 48-hour periods of notice so that there was never we're not just getting somebody on an off hour, they're taking a nap and weren't able to respond. But I went through the people they were citing as experts, and these people are anti-Semitic, they're communists, they're extremely far left and in favor of violence. And even some of the writers at Press Progress, like Steve Magusiak, if I type in his handle on X and I just type in communism, Israel, I'll just type in some keywords where I could assume some far left person says some extremely concerning things, and you'll see all these threads where it's like deleted post, deleted post, deleted post, and it's clearly only Steve's, and people are reacting to him. He's like, are you saying it was good that people were killed in the Holodomor? Like, people are reacting to him saying insane stuff. This person works for the organization who would smear you for just showing up to an event that's like pushing for lower immigration, that wants gender theory out of schools. Right now, and this is part of it, you get some slightly more mainstream outlets who do the same thing. So I help work with the 1BC party in British Columbia, and we've had one of our events shut down in Penticton because a local queer activist by their own like label has got us shut down at one of the conference centers, and then we went to another one and they resisted all the pressure. And when that person who was running the second location we went to leaked all the person's messages, basically saying that we're racists and we're hateful, that person said that they were being doxxed. That none of their personal information was released. Simply this person whose name is Loki Boki. I'm not sure if that's a made-up name or their actual born name. Who knows? It's apparently doxing for people to know they're going around smearing people. And the Tyee will report on 1BC and just call us extremists, well, because this random activist said so. And that's again, it goes back to the media are just a bunch of Redditors with more polish. They have the thought process of a Reddit moderator, and just having a nice website doesn't mean that it's well researched. Oftentimes it's just some random person said something, they agree with them, so they printed it.
Well, exactly. And this is what they do. And I don't mean to like make it all about myself and my family, but I just think it's a perfect example of how they launder a smear, right? So in this Globe and Mail article about my husband, this is the game that they play. They say that Kaz, first of all, they incorrectly said that he was a staffer for the Conservative Party. I read the correction. He wasn't. He worked for the minister. So he worked in the government. Then it says that he gets frequent attention for his association with True North. And then basically they had said incorrectly that he was the founder of it, even though he wasn't. But Press Progress pushes this idea that my husband started it, even though he didn't. I started it, and I had proof, and that's why the Globe and Mail switched it back to saying that his wife started it, not him. So Kaz is married to me. So that's one degree of separation. His wife started a company, right? That company is called True North. And then it says in 2024, True North published and subsequently removed an interview with the founder of the Proud Boys, right? And then it says Public Safety describes the Proud Boys as a neo-fascist terrorist organization associated with white supremacist ideology. So that's two more degrees of separation, right? So Kaz is married to me. I started an organization. A journalist at my organization sat down and did an interview with Gavin McInnes. Gavin McInnes then left the Proud Boys. And after he left the organization, it got designated as a terrorist group. So to go from Kaz to Candice, down to one of my journalists, across to Gavin McInnes, and then from Gavin, an organization that he's no longer affiliated with. That's 5 degrees of separation.
It wasn't like he left and then the day after they were designated as a terrorist organization.
Years later, a couple years later.
Like 5 years beforehand, because it was just a joke group he started, and then he left when he started doing other media stuff, and then it turned into something else. And again, it's hilarious that we cannot label Antifa as a terrorist group, but we label the Proud Boys. You know, I'm not exactly a fan of the things the Proud Boys do, but they only really engage in street violence with Antifa. They don't go around trying to kick over tables and blare horns when a left-wing speaker shows up. They mostly
They don't firebomb like churches or the left-wing equivalent, right? They don't firebomb university campuses, right?
Yeah, they don't shoot up ICE offices.
Right. So all that's to say, like, I don't like Gavin McInnes. I don't like Proud Boys. The other caveat that I mentioned to the Globe and Mail was that interview was published a few days after my child was born, and so I was like on a maternity leave, so I wasn't actually like running the organization at the time. They didn't care, right? It was all just part of a smear. And so it's like, my husband gets a new job, the Globe and Mail's writing about it, and they think that their audience, like the most important thing that they need to know about Kaz, who's running this company, is that his wife's company had a journalist that sat down with someone who had at some point previously in their career done this. And the funny thing is that the Globe and Mail also interviewed Gavin McInnes, right? The CBC also sat down with an interview with Gavin McInnes like the same month that one of our journalists at True North did. So it's like somehow it's okay for them to do it and not for us. It is so outrageous how they put a target on our back. And I'm going to just tie this back and then we'll wrap this up, Wyatt. Tie it back to Charlie Kirk, right? Because part of the reason that he was assassinated is because the media did this to him, right? The media called him a far right. They called him a Nazi. They called him a fascist. They were okay with pushing that idea, which put a target on his back ultimately that ended in the tragic loss of his life, right? The unfathomable cold-blooded murder during a political event, during a university debate, right? And so this is the outcome of what they do, right? They put targets on our backs. They use outrageous smears to describe us, and crazy people out there listen and take it seriously. And I just think it's so reckless that they do this kind of thing. I'm glad that it's getting exposed. I'm glad that some editor over there at the Globe and Mail was like, yeah, we probably shouldn't just peddle this total lie from Press Progress in our paper, which we pretend to be prestigious and like the paper of record. And I'm happy at least, but I think we still need to call it out and tell people how outrageous it is that conservatives, and again, it's not just me and my husband, this is just an example, but Press Progress does this every day. They do it to you, Wyatt. They do it to conservative MPs. They do it to Pierre Poilievre all the time. They call him far right. They peddle these dangerous terms, and it's not good for anybody. And I hope that it leads to them losing their credibility. Last thoughts on this.
I hate the equivalency that people will create between a conservative saying someone's a socialist or a communist here and there when they don't like a policy from someone, and then the left relentlessly calling people far right, you're a Nazi, you're a fascist. And it's not just they throw, they don't like saying you did, and he's such a fascist, and then they move on, they don't repeat that. It will be repeated every day. He's a danger, he has to be stopped. And it's constantly this, where on the right, you sometimes jab people, you sometimes put maybe an unkind label, but it doesn't go past that. It doesn't become the eyes popping out of your skull, this guy has to be stopped or everyone's going to lose their rights. It never goes there. Is there right-wing violence? Sure, but it really isn't connected to the mainstream of the right telling people that these things, would be maybe okay if they happened, or this person needs to be stopped. You really cannot find that rhetoric on the right. Although I was going to say that you are, in a certain sense, right to say the far left label earlier, because the funny thing is they will label people as Nazis, even though, so they're already smearing you by calling you like a Nazi, and then they'll say far right, but it's like, well, there's a lot of here's all the laundering. People don't actually know this. After the World War II in the 40s and 50s, the Soviet Union tried to find a way of smearing conservatives as having generated the Nazis, even though they are the National Socialists, believe in socialism, and there's nothing that actually makes them right wing. So that's my little pet peeve. I always hate when people say the fascists and National Socialists are somehow right wing. They're totalitarian, anti-free speech,
Big up.
anti-liberty, and being racist isn't right wing. Just look at Pol Pot's regime in Cambodia.
100%. Wyatt, well, I always appreciate having you on the show. Thanks so much. Appreciate the time, Wyatt, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Okay, folks, I am pleased now to be joined by Jonathan Wellham. Jonathan is the president and CEO of Rocklink Investment. Rocklink is an independent investment management firm focused on creating portfolios of high-quality assets. It is based in Burlington, Ontario. They are a proud sponsor of Juno News. So, Jonathan, welcome to the show. Great to see you.
Good to see you again, Candice, and enjoy the programs that you've been doing the last little while. They've been excellent.
Great. Well, I appreciate it. So I wanted to bring you on today to talk a little bit about the fiscal situation in Canada. Mark Carney and the PBO warn of a mega budget deficit, no balanced budget goal, as Carney Liberal announces this mega budget deficit came out September 15th. Both Prime Minister Mark Carney, government of House Leader Steve McKinnon have told Canadians to prepare for a hefty deficit in the upcoming budget, but the refusal to provide an exact estimate of the shortfall. You know, usually when a government comes in, I mean, they were elected, we expected some kind of an update. In the spring, we didn't get anything. We're told it's coming in the fall, and to sort of brace for it. I imagine that they're going to try to do exactly what Trudeau did, which is just spend their way out of financial trouble. So I'm wondering if you can comment on that.
Well, in fact, according to the numbers that are coming down the pipe, it looks like he'll be spending, that is, Mark Carney will be spending probably up to $100 billion more over the next little while than what was already factored into the Trudeau budgets going forward. And so, no, I think we are in a much worse position. And when you look at the breakdown of where he's spending the money, I mean, he's doing a lot of smoke and mirrors. He's talking about balancing the operating budget in 3 years and so forth, but then he's separating the operating day-to-day budget from capital spending. But a lot of the capital spending, you have to really look at what he's doing there. It's ridiculous. It's not really going into the right kind of projects. And we can't really trust the government in terms of where it's spending its money. So it's very concerning. Basically, as you know, the public sector has been growing at 2-3 times the rate of growth in the economy. And that's overall growth. That's not growth per capita, which has actually been shrinking. And so we've just been this massive expansion of the state in Canada the last 10 years. And this does not look like it's stopping, regardless of what he's saying.
Well, I think that Canadians are worried about that, but we're also worried about the broader economy. I know that, you know, anytime that there's jobs numbers are not as strong as what analysts had expected, feels like the economy is certainly under stress. I don't know that it's currently in a recession. It doesn't quite meet the definition, but it seems like we might be heading in that direction. I don't think you have a crystal ball over there, Jonathan, but I'm wondering, what do you expect for the Canadian economy? I know that it doesn't necessarily have to do with the government, but government has a lot to do with the environment. Do people want to invest in the country? Do people want to start businesses? Is now a good time to buy a house? Like, what do you think of the current state of the Canadian economy?
Yeah, I mean, I'd argue the current economy is actually in a recession. If you look at the growth GDP per capita, because we've just swamped the country with immigrants, and so yeah, you can keep the sort of growth going overall, but it's really per person that you should be looking at. That's number one. Number two, over the last 10 years, we've starved the Canadian economy of capital. And so the best estimates, again, from experts who have looked at this is through, because of, C69, 48, all the moratoriums on oil and gas and so forth, that's led to a shortfall of $670 billion of capital over the last 10 years. So if you pull $670 billion that, didn't go into the economy, that would generate well over $1.5 trillion in GDP over a number of years. And so, of course, people are going to be feeling that. If you pull capital out and capital is not coming into the country, it's not being invested in capital projects, infrastructure, building and utilizing our natural resources, then Canada is not going to be expanding, it's not going to be growing, and we're not going to be creating the jobs. I mean, just the estimates off of $670 billion, you're talking there are hundreds of thousands of jobs that were not created. and then all of the multiplier effect of that in the economy. And so the longer this goes on, the more we're really going to feel it in Canada, because we now are falling further and further behind our competitors, in particular the United States, because what Donald Trump's doing is the exact opposite. He's cranking up the capital, he's lowering taxes, he's lowering regulations, he's making it easier for businesses to come in, and he's also using some leverage, the tariffs and the power of the US economy. And why would anybody invest more money in Canada when you can go south of the border and have your capital respected?
Well, it's such an interesting time, right? Because you do have Trump sort of temporarily disrupting the flow of the economy through the new measures of tariffs and trying to raise money in different ways, and including, interestingly, putting price tags on, their equivalent of a temporary foreign worker, saying, sure, you can continue to do this H-1B program, but you have to pay $100,000 per year per employee, which makes it so that Americans can be more competitive. Or, hey, you can have a green card, you just have to pay us $1 million. Interesting ways to raise money, but obviously a little bit disruptive in the economy. But the long-term goal, the medium to long-term goal, is to reindustrialize America, right? We saw during globalization, the 80s, 90s, the 2000s, just total outsourcing of jobs and good sort of middle-class manufacturing jobs. When it came to like the new tech manufacturing jobs, it was all happening overseas, mostly in Asia and in China. And Trump is taking measures, and it might be temporarily, harmful because of the uncertainty that it might create. But in the long run, it's like you're going to get those jobs back into America, and you're getting people excited about building the American resurgence and revival. And I wish that Canada would get on board with that. And I wish Canada would say, yes, we want to do that too. Let's be your partner and let's build and grow. And I'm seeing a lot of optimism from my friends in places like the Silicon Valley and New York, and those are blue cities, and people are still excited about the Trump administration, let alone the revival that's happening around the rest of the country. It seems like we're kind of missing out on that. What do you think?
Well, absolutely, we're missing out on it completely. I mean, we're following diametrically opposite policies. We're continuing the global agenda, and Trump has said no more. He spoke at the UN just yesterday or the day before, and that was an amazing speech. He laid it out. He said, "No, we're not going to sacrifice our economy. We're not going to, bow before the green agenda, which is absolutely nonsense and a scam," as he mentioned at the session. Meanwhile, we've got our prime minister there saying, we're going to continue with all the decarbonization and all of the green agenda, which is expensive, and it will be inflationary, and it will put people out of jobs, when the US is going to do the exact opposite. And so, no, that's why people are excited in the States. I mean, there's a bit of detox going on in the US because you have to clean up the mess that was left there from, many regimes, especially, of course, the last 4 years with Biden. But, when you're stopping the net flow of illegal immigrants, yeah, there's going to be some short-term pain for that. But now you're investing back in Americans. You're investing back in your own people, which is what the game plan should be for any government. You're also, maybe prices go up a little bit because you're not offshoring a lot of the manufacturing, but then all of the money stays in your country. So you're paying higher wages to people who will be able to go back into the stores, buy the cars in your own country. And so, what Donald Trump is doing is amazing. I mean, it's a complete reversal of globalization and the gutting and the hollowing out of the Western countries, which is what we've seen over the last number of decades. And he said enough is enough. And so I think people will get excited, and we're right next to the US. Instead of taking the cue from them and doing what is right, we're still aligning ourselves with the failing European economies, as Trump pointed out in his address too. I mean, the decisions they made they're killing themselves. It's absolute suicide.
Right. It looks like a dying civilization over there. I want to mention this National Billboard Blitz. Juno News covered this exclusive National Billboards Blitz giving Carney a failing grade. So you might see these billboards popping up in on a freeway near you. And here's we reported Canadians may soon see billboards across the country giving Prime Minister Mark Carney a failing grade in its first 6 months. The Buffalo Project launched a new campaign on Wednesday with billboards popping up in major cities like Ottawa, Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatoon, and even Nepean, which Carney represents in the House of Commons. The campaigns were report card, which you can check out at reportoncarney.ca, graded Carney on the joint demands made by Alberta and Saskatchewan. While he mostly was given Fs and F minuses, he did get a C for creating a trade and energy corridor, which he's planning to do, right? That's what Bill, I think, C2 plans to do, or is it C5? One of the two. But he hasn't done it yet. And it's interesting because during the election campaign, he was talking about the speed that he was going to travel and how, it was an emergency and a crisis, and he was here to act, and he was the guy in a crisis. And yet, like, we're 6 months in, and it's hard to even really point to anything that he's done, right? He's still, parroting the same things, like you mentioned, the UN, virtue signaling, and bashing our national resources and our energy. And I don't actually really see a lot of action. I'm wondering what your take on that is.
Well, again, he's a central banker. So this idea that you're going to get a central banker driving the economy is absolutely outrageous. That's not the position any central banker has ever done. I mean, they're big bureaucrats, and they're overeducated individuals who are steeped in false ideology. So I think first, I mean, he doesn't have the background to get things done. He's not a Donald Trump. He's not someone who's surrounded himself with a cabinet of incredibly successful people who know how to execute a plan. And then secondly, that's not his ideology. I mean, he's completely given over to a global agenda and the whole green agenda. So for him to sort of fast track energy projects and resource projects, it's completely contrary to what he really wants to do. And so I think he's going to slow walk these, and you'll get something out of him, but it'll be very slow and inefficient. Instead of just opening up the private sector, I mean, look at his initiatives. He talks about this infrastructure building. Well, there's plenty of capital that would come into the country through the private sector if he got rid of all these bills that they've passed over the last number of years, and they fast tracked these projects. We wouldn't have to be spending any tax dollars. But that's not what he wants to do. He wants top down. He wants the money coming through Ottawa and controlling everything. And if that's the way it's going to go, which I'm sure that's the way it is going to go, it's going to be slow, inefficient. We'll be overpaying for infrastructure projects. We'll be wasting more and more money. I mean, some of the projects that they've done are 4, 5, 6 times what they should have spent on these projects. And so I think that's what we're in for going forward. And I don't see any reversal of that. And so I think Canadians are getting increasingly frustrated. I'm out on the street talking to people, and they are very disappointed with Mark Carney and what he's pulled off. But in some cases, why are they disappointed? I mean, it's the same government that we had the last 10 years. You just changed the figurehead. But I think you've got an even more dangerous person because he's smooth, and he's a little smoother than Trudeau, and he looks a little more professional, and he doesn't have the crazy socks. So, people think he's a little more stable, but he's not. He was behind the regime before, and he's going to, I think, push the same agenda. I don't believe a word that he's saying at this point. Action speaks louder than any words.
It's almost funny how it's almost like a mirror image of what's happening in the United States, right? It's like people voted for Joe Biden because they thought he was a moderate. They associated with him with Barack Obama, but they thought he was more moderate than Obama was, which is kind of similar with Justin Trudeau, right? Everyone by the end realized that Justin Trudeau was pretty much a radical leftist, and that so many of the things that he did, that he believed in, put his ideology ahead of the well-being of our country, which ended up really, really harming Canadians and hurting our economy. And I think that was sort of generally, that was consensus. And so we brought in Mark Carney, who Canadians do view as more moderate. He looks more moderate. He looks like a prime minister who would be moderate. But his ideology is rooted in the exact same thing that Justin Trudeau does. But Jonathan, I know that your day job is you're president and CEO of Rocklink, which is an investment organization. You focus on personal finance. And so in this sort of, unstable or, kind of potentially dangerous political environment and economic times, like what are your recommendations? What is it that you do for your clients?
Yeah, we try to look at all of these factors that we've talked about and then incorporate that into an investment thesis, which basically means you want to be very careful about allocating money into Canada. I mean, you have to be very highly selective because we are having all these restrictions top down from the government. So I think it is restricting some of the companies, although we do have some fantastic businesses if they were let to do what they like to do. We got quite a bit of money in the US, as you would expect, because I do think, contrary to what a lot of the economists say, I mean, there are challenges down there. Don't get me wrong, but I think that they are going in the right direction, and there's a lot of growth in the technology area, and in other industries. And we also have precious metals. So again, we're very concerned about the overall debt crisis around the world, the overspending, the deficits. We're going to see that in Canada, even in the United States. Trump eventually is going to have to rein that in. He's trying to grow the economy, of course, and I think he's also trying to get the Republicans elected in the midterms. So he doesn't want to create too much instability. But so we go in some of those spaces also. So gold, silver, some of the precious metals, harder commodities. If you have pressure on your currencies, which I think is going to continue, in other words, you're going to lose purchasing power because there's just too much debt. They're going to inflate some of that away. Then you want to own really strategic commodities. And there are a number of places that people can invest to try to protect capital. So that's what we're doing. We're just saying to people, listen, let's batten down the hatches. Let's be careful. There's some growth areas. Let's not chase them, but find business that are trading at good valuations. And then let's put a little bit in some of the precious metals where we can try to, again, maintain purchasing power. That's going to be very important in the next number of years.
So interesting. Well, folks, you can learn more over at rocklink.com. That's ROCKLINC.com. Jonathan, I always appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And thank you for your support of Juno News and the Candice Malcolm Show.
Great. Thank you very much, Candice.
All right, folks. Well, I have just a quick programming note before I end the program. I am taking a little bit of a step back from doing this podcast. So as you know, during the election, I was doing it every day. Over the summer, I stepped back and I had Chris Sims guest hosting the show on Mondays. And then we had Ron Chisner doing a show on Friday. Well, we're going to continue with that. We're going to expand the lineup of podcast hosts and news reporters here on the airways. We're really excited. In the coming days and weeks, we'll be announcing a few new shows. We will bring you content every day, day in, day out. I'm personally going to take a few weeks to focus on my family. As you know, I have 4 small children. My husband changed jobs recently, and so we're in a bit of a period of transition. I will be back in November, though, and I will be back to deliver the news. In the meantime, I'm going to leave you in very good, very capable hands here at Juno News. So really appreciate your support, and I will be back. I'll probably come back as a guest on other shows as well, so you might still see me around, but I won't be hosting this show regularly again until November. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Thank you so much. I'm Candice Malcolm. This is Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you, and God bless.